In this episode, we're going to focus on a deceptively simple idea. Someone can hide instructions inside text so that an AI system follows the hidden instructions instead of the rules it was supposed to follow. That is the heart of prompt injection, and it matters because modern AI assistants are often placed in the middle of important workflows. They read documents, summarize emails, answer questions using internal knowledge, and sometimes take actions through connected tools. If an attacker can slip malicious instructions into content the model will read, the attacker can steer the model's behavior without ever directly logging into the system. For brand new learners, the key is to realize that the model does not automatically know which text is trustworthy and which text is a trap. It sees tokens and tries to produce a helpful next output, and it can be manipulated by cleverly phrased content. Detecting prompt injection means learning to recognize indicators that suggest the model is being pushed off course, triaging the event so you know how serious it might be, and choosing containment options that reduce harm while you investigate. When you understand prompt injection as a security problem, not a quirky AI trick, you start building habits that make systems safer. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A helpful starting definition is this. Prompt injection is when untrusted input contains instructions that try to override or redirect the model's intended behavior. The untrusted input could be anything the system reads, like a web page, a document, a support ticket, a chat message, or a piece of retrieved text. The attacker's goal is usually to get the model to do something it should not do, such as revealing hidden instructions, exposing secrets, ignoring safety rules, or taking unsafe actions through tools. Beginners sometimes imagine the attack requires exotic code, but often it is just ordinary language, written in a way that exploits the model's tendency to follow instructions. One key idea is that the attacker is trying to confuse authority, making the model treat a random paragraph as if it were a high-priority system instruction. Another key idea is that the attack can be indirect. The attacker doesn't talk to the model directly. They plant text that the model will later consume. That indirect path is what makes the problem so important, because it can show up in places you don't expect, like a harmless-looking document or a customer message. Indicators are the clues that suggest prompt injection might be happening, and the easiest indicators often come from the text itself. Injection attempts frequently include phrases that try to seize control, like telling the model to ignore previous instructions, reveal hidden content, or change roles. They may include strong directive language, such as insisting that the model must comply, or claiming that the instructions are authorized by an administrator. They often include requests for secrets, such as asking for system prompts, internal policies, credentials, or private data. Another common indicator is unnatural formatting, like long blocks of instructions that look like they were copied from a playbook, or text that tries to look like configuration data or policy text. Attackers may also add urgency, like claiming there is an emergency and safety rules should be bypassed. These are not guaranteed signs of malice, but they are reliable reasons to be suspicious. Beginners should learn to notice when content shifts from being informational into being controlling, especially when the content is coming from outside the trusted boundary. Another set of indicators shows up not in the prompt content, but in the model's behavior. If the model suddenly starts refusing normal requests, producing irrelevant output, or repeating certain phrases, that could mean it was steered by injected instructions. If the model begins to reveal internal details that it normally would not, that is a high-severity indicator. If the model starts to treat a user's document as if it were a system policy and begins following directives from it, that is another warning sign. You can also see indicators in conversation flow, such as the model ignoring the user's question and instead responding to a directive embedded in quoted text. In systems that use retrieval, an injection attempt might be pulled into the context window from an external source, and the model might start referencing content that the user did not provide. For beginners, the lesson is to watch for sudden changes in relevance and boundary behavior. A model that seems to change personalities or priorities midstream may be responding to a hidden instruction rather than to the intended task. Some indicators are statistical and pattern-based rather than obvious in a single interaction. For example, if you see many different users triggering similar refusals or strange outputs after interacting with the same document or the same knowledge source, that suggests the source may contain injected content. If a particular external website or file type is associated with a spike in suspicious prompts, that is another pattern indicator. You might also see repeated attempts from one actor to feed the system content that is likely to be consumed later, such as uploading documents with embedded directives. At scale, this looks like a campaign, repeated small tests, then a more targeted attempt once the attacker learns how your system behaves. Beginners often focus on one dramatic example, but real attacks can be gradual and subtle. Detecting prompt injection is therefore about combining content clues, behavior clues, and pattern clues. You want to know not only what happened in one case, but whether it is happening repeatedly or spreading through shared content. Triage is what you do after you suspect an injection attempt, and it means quickly assessing severity and scope so you can choose the right response. A beginner-friendly triage approach starts with two questions. What could the attacker gain, and what could be harmed? If the injected instruction is simply trying to make the model say something silly, the impact might be low. If it is trying to extract secrets, the impact could be high, especially if the model has access to sensitive context. If it is trying to trigger tool actions, the impact could be very high, because actions can change systems and data. Next, you ask about exposure. Did the model actually comply, partially comply, or refuse? A refusal is not the end of the story, but it is a good sign. Partial compliance matters because even small leaks can be combined into bigger ones over time. You also ask whether the suspicious content came from a one-off user prompt or from a shared source like a document repository. Shared sources increase scope because many users and sessions might be affected. During triage, you also want to identify the entry point and the trust boundary that was crossed. If the injection came directly from a user's prompt, you may be dealing with a direct attack attempt by that user. If it came from a retrieved document, you may be dealing with indirect injection where the attacker poisoned a knowledge source. If it came from a web page the model was asked to summarize, the risk includes the entire category of external content ingestion. Identifying the entry point helps you decide containment, because containment should focus on cutting off the harmful source. Another triage factor is repeatability. Can you reproduce the behavior consistently, or was it a one-time glitch? Repeatability suggests a stable injection pattern that will keep causing harm. A one-time odd response might still matter, but it may not indicate a systemic vulnerability. Beginners should learn that triage is not about proving the entire attack. It is about making a quick, conservative risk call that buys you time. Containment options are the practical steps you take to reduce harm while you investigate and fix the issue. One containment option is to block or quarantine the suspicious content source, such as removing a document from the knowledge base, disabling a connector, or preventing retrieval from a certain domain. Another option is to constrain the model's capabilities temporarily, such as disabling tool actions or limiting access to sensitive data sources until confidence is restored. A common containment move is to increase scrutiny for certain sessions, like requiring additional human approval for high-risk actions or responses. You can also adjust filters to detect known injection phrases and patterns, though beginners should understand that attackers can vary wording, so filters are helpful but not sufficient. Another containment step is to isolate affected users or tenants, especially if the attack seems targeted. The idea is to stop the bleeding first, then do deeper analysis. Containment should be proportional, because shutting down everything can cause unnecessary disruption, but failing to contain can allow continued exploitation. A particularly important containment concept is preventing instruction mixing, meaning you want to reduce the chance that untrusted content is treated like a command. One high-level method is to clearly label and separate different types of text in the model's context. For instance, the system can treat retrieved documents as reference material rather than as directives, and it can apply rules that say the model should never follow instructions found inside retrieved text. Another method is to reduce how much untrusted text is fed to the model in the first place, through content filtering and summarization that strips directive language. Some systems introduce a policy that user-provided and externally retrieved content is always lower priority than system rules, and they enforce that in multiple layers. For beginners, you can think of this like a mailroom. Letters from outside can contain requests, but they cannot change company policy. You can read them, extract facts, and respond, but you do not let them rewrite your rules. Containment aims to restore that boundary so the model can continue operating without being steered by hostile text. Another crucial part of responding is preserving evidence without spreading the harmful content. When prompt injection is suspected, you want to capture enough detail to understand what happened, but you do not want to paste the malicious instructions into many tickets, chat threads, and emails, because that can propagate the attack or expose sensitive material. Safe evidence handling might include storing the content in a restricted case file and referencing it by identifier elsewhere. It might include redacting the most dangerous parts, like explicit requests for secrets, while keeping enough to recognize patterns. You also want to capture the model's response, the context source identifiers, the policy version, and the timing, because these details help you reproduce and fix the issue. For beginners, the lesson is that investigations require good records, but good records must be handled carefully. Logging and auditing practices should support incident response, not become part of the problem. Prompt injection incidents often touch both security and product teams, so clear, controlled evidence sharing is essential. It is also worth addressing misconceptions that can lead beginners astray. One misconception is that prompt injection is only a problem if the model is connected to tools. Tool connections increase impact, but even a read-only assistant can leak data by revealing hidden context or summarizing sensitive documents incorrectly. Another misconception is that adding more warnings to prompts will solve it, like telling the model very strongly to ignore external instructions. That helps sometimes, but attackers can still craft text that competes for attention, and the model can still be influenced. A third misconception is that you can detect injection perfectly with keyword lists. Keyword detection is useful, but attackers can paraphrase, use indirect phrasing, or split instructions across content in ways that evade simple matching. Real defense uses layered controls: input filtering, context separation, least privilege for data and tools, and monitoring for suspicious patterns. Beginners do not need to implement these layers, but they should understand why no single trick solves the problem. To close, detecting prompt injection attempts involves learning the indicators, performing triage that assesses severity and scope, and applying containment options that cut off harmful sources and reduce risky capabilities while you investigate. Indicators can appear in the text itself, such as attempts to override instructions or request secrets, and they can appear in model behavior, such as sudden irrelevance or boundary violations. Triage focuses on what the attacker could gain, whether the model complied, and whether the injection came from a shared source that could affect many users. Containment can include quarantining content sources, tightening access to sensitive data, disabling high-risk actions, and improving separation between untrusted content and trusted instructions. Prompt injection is best understood as a trust boundary problem. The model reads text, but not all text is allowed to steer behavior. When you treat prompts and retrieve content as potential telemetry for manipulation, you build AI systems that remain useful without becoming easy to steer by whoever can sneak words into the pipeline.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.